Hi class, it's Patty Laney. It is Monday, December 5th, about 12:26 p.m. So welcome to December. Before I give an overview of our assignments for this week, I just want to thank all of you for your hard work. I know that classes can be busy and life can be busy and work can be busy. So just want to thank all of you for your hard work and for hanging in there. And we have this week and next week left of our courses. So this week we are focusing on some of the legal aspects of policing, specifically related to some limitations on the authority of law enforcement officers related to arrest, search and seizure, warrant requirements, police and custodial interrogation. And we touch on these legal issues a bit in this class, but you will be focusing on the legal requirements like Fourth Amendment issues and those similar types of legal restrictions on the authority of law enforcement officers and other classes as well. So this class sort of just touches on those ideas and those concepts because it's more of a policing class. So just be aware that you will be studying those concepts in other classes as well. And that's what the classes do, is they sort of build on the concepts. In some classes you focus on certain concepts and then we build on that content in other classes as well. That's the idea of education as a whole. It's the idea of, we present information to you, and the idea is you learn the information and we want you to learn these concepts so that you are able to actually apply them in your position, whether it be a law enforcement officer or some other position in criminal justice. So that's really my goal in this class as well, is to help you learn these concepts, not just so that you memorize them, but that you can actually apply them. You can use them in certain situations. It's the whole idea of critical thinking as you are presented with future challenges and situations in your job, whatever that may be. You have the knowledge, you have the experience to carry out your job as you should in the field of criminal justice. So our assignments this week, we are reading chapters 10 and 13 of our textbook, and chapter 10 is called Policing and the Law, and again it talks about sort of what we call these constitutional issues, or the rights of suspects, the constitutional rights of suspects in situations with law enforcement officers. So the Supreme Court case of Miranda versus Arizona, it says Miranda versus U.S., but it's actually Miranda versus Arizona. That is the Supreme Court case that established the protection against self-incrimination, and it established the requirement that law enforcement officers advise a suspect of his or her rights prior to questioning and when the suspect is in custody. So the concept and the reasoning of the Miranda case is based on the wording of the Fifth Amendment. We know that the United States is the highest court in our judicial system, in our criminal justice system. And so Miranda was an actual person. He was charged with a crime. He confessed to the crime. He was found guilty. He appealed his case all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court and argued that he should have been advised of his rights prior to being questioned and interrogated when he was in custody. And the Supreme Court said essentially, yes, we agree. That's a very simplified explanation of the Miranda case. But as a result of the Supreme Court's analysis of the Fifth Amendment, we now have procedural requirements that law enforcement officers must follow. You probably have seen in TV shows and movies law enforcement officers advising the suspect of the right to remain silent. The concept of the right to remain silent, I don't think, is very complicated. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can well be used against you in the court of law. You have the right to an attorney. That's under the Sixth Amendment. But I think what's most complicated and what you probably really need to focus on when we talk about Miranda cases or Miranda issues is when the officer must be required to read Miranda. And Miranda is only required when a suspect is in custody and being interrogated. Now, just because a person is being questioned by law enforcement officers, that doesn't mean the person is in custody. So Those are some of the legal issues to consider and to keep in mind when you read the content this week regarding Miranda issues. The Weeks case is a search and seizure case. Terry versus Ohio is a search and seizure case. And Carroll versus U.S. is a search and seizure case related to vehicles. The Fourth Amendment contains wording that protects us from unreasonable searches and seizures. And so through Supreme Court cases and through the Supreme Court's analysis of the wording and the concepts of the Fourth Amendment and other amendments as well, the Supreme Court has issued guidelines and essentially procedural rules that govern the actions of law enforcement officers when law enforcement officers are gathering evidence of a crime through search and seizure, or maybe through questioning. That's a Fifth Amendment issue. So this chapter, chapter 10, and the content in this week really focuses on these constitutional rights of suspects, and what those are. Those constitutional rights, in a sense, are limitations on the actions of law enforcement officers in gathering evidence. We have a Fourth Amendment protection against self-incrimination, or Fourth Amendment protection against unreasonable searches and seizures. There's a reference to the warrant requirement in the Fourth Amendment. And the Fifth Amendment, of course, protects us from self-incrimination, meaning we don't have to speak against our interests. We don't have to make comments against our interests or that show our guilt unless we voluntarily want to. So there's an exercise here for you to complete. Let's go to assignments. So your discussion topic this week is to talk about a Supreme Court case that has an impact on essentially the limitations of law enforcement officers in a criminal case. So there's an example here. Miranda dictated that police officers must read a suspect their Miranda rights prior to questioning about the crime that was committed. So you can select, be sure you select a U.S. Supreme Court case. You can do some research. You can select a case from your reading. But you need to find a case that really has an impact on the authority of law enforcement officers in gathering evidence of a crime. That's what we're focusing on in this week. For your assignment this week, you are submitting essentially your police project. Now this paper should include all of the previous content that you submitted. What you can do is you can just copy and paste the wording from the previous papers into one paper. Now be sure that you have corrected any spelling or punctuation errors. Be sure to please review my comments and suggestions in the papers that you previously submitted. Please note that when you submit your papers, I open up your paper and I make extensive comments, suggestions, and edits and corrections. And then I attach that paper to the gradebook and to the grading rubric. So please, 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 if you do not know how to find, or if you are not seeing my comments in your papers, please let me know, because I expect that you will include the information that I suggest and that you will make the corrections that I suggested in your previous papers. So be sure to review those papers. And again, let me know if you have any questions about my comments and suggestions. So that's the paper, and I think that's it in terms of what I wanted to suggest to you or discuss with you today. Let's see. Hold on one second. Just an update. So this coming Friday, December 9, I am going to give a live lecture, sort of end of quarter review. It's this Friday, December 9 at 1 o'clock p.m. You should be able to click on this link to get to my WebEx or to my virtual meeting space. If you cannot attend, that's fine. It is not required that you attend, but I will record the session and then send you a link to watch the session. Now remember, we only have 2 weeks left of this course. We have this week and next week. This class does end on Friday, December 16, so that is the end of the course. You must submit all assignments by Friday, December 16, 11:59 p.m. If you miss that deadline by even 1 minute, you do not receive points for the assignments. So next week in Module 11, you do have a final exam. It is 50 questions. It's multiple choice. It is not timed, but you must submit it before 11:59 p.m. Otherwise, you will not receive points. Even 1 minute after the deadline, you do not receive any points. That is a hard deadline. So I think that's all that I wanted to present for you today for Module 10. As always, be sure to contact me if you have any questions or concerns, and have a great week.